Hello everyone, this is Ashley Tucker. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a bunch of Christmas cards using the Critter Sweaters stamp set that came out today in Simon Says Stamp's Fun and Festive release. Now this stamp set goes really well when you pair it with the Critter Sweater dies, which also came out in the Fun and Festive release. But for today's cards, I'm going to show you how to use these stamps without those dies. As you can see, this stamp set has a bunch of small border stamps that can be used to make Christmas sweaters. I took every single one of those border stamps and I lined them up in my MISTI tool, and then I stamped them with versamark ink onto a bunch of different cardstock. For today's video, I made 5 cards, but you could easily create tons of cards using this technique. For 2 of the card backgrounds, I used Neenah Solar White, and for the other 3, I used some Gina K cardstocks in the colors Cherry Red, In the Navy, and Turquoise Sea. For this Turquoise Sea background, I did not use versamark ink. Instead, I used a Distress Oxide ink in the color Faded Jeans, and then I embossed over that with a clear embossing powder. Because Distress Oxide ink is a hybrid between pigment ink and dye ink, it stays wet for a while just like pigment ink does, so you can emboss on it. For the red background, I used white embossing powder. For the navy one, I used a silver embossing powder, and for one of my Neenah Solar White backgrounds, I used a gold embossing powder. Now I stamped all of these before I embossed them all. I just set them to the side and made sure that nothing touched them. It's much easier and much faster to do it this way. In hindsight, I kind of wish that I had lined up the stamps using a T-square ruler because some of them weren't exactly straight, but it didn't bother me enough to redo all of these. Okay, so now I'm working on the second Neenah Solar White background. For this one, I decided to use a bunch of different colors of Distress Oxide ink. The way that I did this is I inked up the stamp on the top, and I used Post-it notes to mask off the stamps underneath it to protect them from getting any ink on them. Once I finished stamping with one stamp, I would remove it from the MISTI and then move down to the next one. Because I removed stamps as I was making this background is not as easy to replicate as all of the other ones. Now you could do a little bit more masking so that you don't have to remove stamps, but that's going to add on a lot of time to making this card. That's why I only did one of these, and I did it at the end of doing all of the backgrounds. Now the colors that I used to make this are Candied Apple, Worn Lipstick, Cracked Pistachio, Evergreen Bough, and Iced Spruce. This is one of my favorite color combinations to use for Christmas cards. It's a little non-traditional, but I love the addition of pink and mint green to the traditional red and green Christmas colors. Once I finished all of that stamping, I went over this background with the clear embossing powder. And that actually finishes up all of the stamping and embossing for my backgrounds. I trimmed all of those background panels using my tonic trimmer. Next, I took a circle die and I cut a circle out of every one of my background panels using my Big Shot. I'm going to be turning these into shakers, so I took my ATG gun and I adhered some acetate onto the back of 3 of them, and for the other 2, I decided to use some vellum. It is a lot harder to see the sequins in a vellum shaker, but I really like that subtle look, and I also really love vellum. It's also really nice when you're making a bunch of similar cards to throw in some simple differences. I'm going to be stamping a sentiment from that same stamp set that I used earlier onto those shaker windows with versamark ink. When you emboss on vellum or acetate, you want to give your heat tool a good amount of time to warm up. It's really easy for vellum and acetate to warp, especially the acetate, so you want that heat tool to be on the actual surface for as little time as possible. That's why it's a good idea to let it warm up so that it's nice and hot. Another thing that I've noticed lately with metallic embossing powders is you want to be careful that you don't overheat them. This may not be true for every brand, but I've noticed with a couple of brands of gold embossing powder, if you overheat them, they'll start to bubble up and it doesn't look very nice. And it doesn't take very long for that to happen, especially if your heat gun is nice and hot, so you got to be really careful. So now I'm putting together my shakers, and I don't know if you saw with the very first shaker that I did, but I showed how I put that foam tape around the circle. When I do circle shakers, I like to double up my foam tape so that it's 2 layers thick, and then I take some scissors and I cut it in half lengthwise so that I have 2 really thin strips. I then take one of those strips and I remove the release paper from both sides. If you remove it from just one side, it's a lot harder to work it around that circle shape. But if you remove it from both sides, it's a lot easier to curve it around that circle. So I added the foam tape to the back of each of those background panels, and then I added some different color sequins to those shaker areas. I then took a piece of cardstock in the color that I want to be seen through the shaker, and I closed up that shaker area with it. Once I had all of those shakers done, I took some doubled up foam tape and I added it to the bottom of the back of the panel so that it would be the same height as that shaker area. Next, I used my ATG gun to add some adhesive to the back of the shakers, and then I adhered these to some card bases. For the first card base, I have a piece of A2 size in the navy cardstock, and on top of that, I have a slightly smaller piece of cherry red cardstock. For all of the other card bases, I used Nina Desert Storm cardstock. Now, most of these cards are done at this point, but for 2 of them, I decided to add some details. For this first one, I used my white gel pen to add some details in between all of those border stamps. I really liked the addition of the white to this color scheme. I don't know if you can tell in the video, but that red cardstock on the card base was actually cut a little bit bigger than I wanted it to be. It's a little bit too big on the top and the bottom. So what I did to kind of fix that is I took my white gel pen and I added some dashes on the top and the bottom to make it look a little bit more intentional. I'm actually not too sure if I like it this way. I kind of wish that I had left those dashed lines off, but I'm not going to fret over it. I think that it's still really pretty and whoever I send it to will probably still like it. For this next card, I used my white gel pen to add some dashed lines around the border. And that actually finishes all 5 of these cards. Here's a closer look at the 5 cards that I created today. I think that first one is my favorite. I think I like it the best because I like the red sequins on the red background, and I put a lot of sequins in it. I'm curious what you guys think. Let me know in the comments which one is your favorite. Thank you for watching today. I hope you really enjoyed all of these cards that I made using the Critter Sweater stamp set from Simon Says Stamp's Fun and Festive release. All of the supplies that I used today can be found in the description down below. If you enjoyed watching and you have not subscribed to my channel yet, I would encourage you to hit that subscribe button so that you can see all of my future videos. I'm going to be back with a new video on Friday. Again, thank you for watching. I really appreciate all of you, and I hope you have a great day today.